Hello, I'm so sorry that I said earlier, yeah, I'm gonna stick to the 2 p.m. streaming, and then here I am 4.5 hours late. I just saw the eclipse in Burlington, and so I drove up on Sunday and then saw it on Monday and then drove back. And I just got back because the traffic was indeed worse than usual. So I thought about reading in the car when it wasn't my turn to read, but my boyfriend David, who was driving, he that was kind of at one of the points where traffic was like stop and go, and he was like, Annie, I think if you read this book in the car, we're both gonna get headaches. And I said yes. And also he was driving, and I was really grateful for that, so I didn't want to get in his way at all. Anyway, though, for the first time I have lost my place a little bit. I think that I was on 342. Let me see. Because I remember where we left off. He was giving a presentation to New York City, being like, he like was pulling down this map, being like, yo, I'm going to put all these highways here. And so I think that's where we left off. Okay. There were other lines on the map too. One ran along the western shore of Manhattan Island all the way up to the Harlem River, over the river, and up through the Bronx. If the West Side Elevated Highway was extended up through Riverside Park, Moses said, and if it was carried across the Harlem by the Henry Hudson Bridge, and if it then ran north to the city line, its northern terminus would be within 3 miles of the southern terminus of the Sawmill River Parkway the state was constructing. If the city built the park, the Henry Hudson Parkway, he called it, he would see that the state extended the Sawmill River Parkway south to meet it, and there would be a continuous through route from the bottom of Manhattan Island to Westchester County. A Henry Hudson Parkway would provide further advantages, Moses explained. It would give the city a fast, modern route to the George Washington Bridge. On the other side of that bridge was Palisades Interstate Park. It would no longer be difficult to reach it. All New Jersey, in fact, would be opened to motorists from the west side of Manhattan. And if the Henry Hudson Parkway was built properly and a great park created alongside it on what was now the mudflats of Riverside Park, the city's residents would not even have to leave the city to find beauty. They would be able to drive along the water, the river stretching to one side of them, the green of the park to the other, above the park, the spires of Manhattan. It would be a public improvement unequaled in the world. 1 second, I'm going to quick grab my water. Before he finished talking about parkways, Moses said, he had a final point. The plan he proposed was admittedly somewhat ambitious, but it was realistic and it was realizable. The dream of opening to the residents of New York City the beauty of the lands around it was in reach. After all, he said, much of it already was reality. The Southern State, Northern State, and Hutchinson River Parkways were already built. The Sawmill River Parkway begun. Much of the rest of it was begun. The State Council of Parks was committed to building the Sawmill River Parkway and Hutchinson River Parkway extensions. At least a start had been made on the Triborough Bridge and the West Side Highway. All that needed to be done was to knit these elements together. Now, he said, he wanted to discuss parks. His listeners, who had noticed that the park along the Henry Hudson Parkway was colored green on the map, saw that much of the land bordering the other parkways Moses was proposing was also green. All along the parkways, he said, there should be small parks. The parkway's right-of-way itself should be ribbon parks, similar to those along the parkways on Long Island. Obtaining the necessary land would be easy along much of the Marginal Boulevard and Cross Island Parkway, and along all the parkways in Staten Island, because the area because the area these parkways ran through was still largely undeveloped, and the land there was cheap. It would be expensive to buy land along some of the other parkways, but it was never going to become cheaper. It would only become more expensive. It should be bought now. The larger green areas on the map, he said, represented larger parks. Specifically, he said, they represented a substantial portion of the last areas of natural beauty remaining in the city. The corridor parks he was proposing in eastern Queens, for example, running roughly along the route of the proposed Grand Central Parkway, represented the last undeveloped portions of the heavily forested hills of the glacial moraine. The parks he was proposing along the north shore of Jamaica Bay represented the last chance to preserve from commercial exploitation the bay's wild marshes and abundant animal and bird life. The park he was proposing on the meadows at Flushing Bay represented the last chance to preserve a portion of that bay from development. These parks, he said, should be purchased at once. His engineers had compiled estimates of their cost, and it was $30 million. A bond issue for that amount should be authorized at once by the Board of Estimate. Admittedly, it would take a hard fight to preserve the board to do what had to be done. He invited the people listening to join in that fight. The reformers stood up and cheered when Moses had finished. But the reaction of city officials was somewhat less satisfying. For all the cooperation he received from them, he might still have been the starry-eyed idealist of 1914, arguing in the language of a Yale Bull session for the construction of mother shelters in Central Park. The scale of his plans was too big for them. Not one city official, he would recall, seemed capable of comprehending a highway network on the scale he had proposed, a fact which would not have been surprising even if the officials had been men of vision, since no highway network on that scale had ever been proposed for any city in America, or for that matter, any city in the world. The scale of the money involved was way too big for them. The total cost would obviously be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they felt there was no sense in the city of even considering such an amount. Pearl's walking on the piano, but it's turned off right now. When it turns on, she gets a little freaked out. What the city officials could comprehend about Moses' plan, they didn't like. The relocations involved for his highways would be on a scale almost unknown in the city. The Whitlock Avenue approach to the Triborough Bridge in the Bronx would alone require the condemnation of buildings containing more than 4,000 apartments, voters' apartments. Does this book come with a map? I wish it did. I think that I'm like much better than probably the average person in the world at New York City geography because I live here, but maybe it's because I don't drive very much. But yeah, especially when we talk about the highways, I kind of lose my mental map. There's maps in it, like I don't know. There was one maybe like 30 pages ago or so, but I don't know. It doesn't make sense to keep flipping back. Sorry. Yeah, I wish. Moses' general plans for his parkway system were turned over for analysis to city engineers, who, sensing the attitude of their superiors, did not rush to begin working on them. Try as he would, Moses could not get the city to move on them. And once the Depression began to tighten its hold on New York, there was no longer much sense in trying to get the city to move. In 1932, the city had not even begun seriously considering any of the parkways he had proposed at the Hotel Commodore dinner 2 years before. Walker's administration did agree in 1930 to issue $30 million in bonds to buy new parkland. In 1930, the city acquired 2,530 acres that would be known as Great Kills. That's a inauspicious name, Great Kills, but fun fact for you is that kill is one of the old oh shoot, I actually forgot the language. I think it might come from Old Dutch. Kill meaning like brook or stream or lake, but it's not used in today's Dutch from what I remember. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like maybe it's Frisian or something else. Or one of the languages spoken. It is Dutch. Okay. Yeah, because there's like fish kill is a city in upstate New York along the Hudson, which just means fish pond, which is very benign. But PETA had some campaign to try to rename it something different. I want to say they tried to rename it Fish Love or something absolutely ridiculous. It didn't go through, but there's just tons of kill related names. Anyway, so the acquisition of acres would be known as Great Kills and Willowbrook Parks on Staten Island, Highland, Alley Pond, and Casina Parks in Queens, and Owl's Head Park in Brooklyn. But by the end of that year, it was becoming apparent that the city's people had needs even more pressing than the need for parks, even if there had still been any market for the bonds that had to be sold to buy them. In 1932, with only $4 million of the $30 million spent and exactly one tenement area park acquired, even most reformers were agreeing that acquisition of parkland was a luxury that New York would have to postpone to some other, happier decade. When Roosevelt, under Moses's prodding, agreed to fight the Depression with a state public works program of unprecedented size, Moses saw the agreement as a chance to make the city move. Okay, interesting that the New Deal happened with Moses's prodding. I did not know that. I'm sure we'll get into it more. The state had never spent any money on roads in New York City, but Moses persuaded Roosevelt to authorize the state's temporary. This isn't the New Deal. This was just in New York State. The state's temporary emergency relief administration to pay the construction costs of the Grand Central Parkway and the Central Avenue link up with the Southern State Parkway, and of another interborough parkway, long proposed but never built, that would provide access into and out of central Brooklyn. The city would have to pay only for the right-of-way. The legislature, having learned the inadvisability of giving Moses an opportunity to drive the opening wedge for a new project that would later turn out to cost many times what he had estimated, gave Moses only $5 million, payable at the rate of a paltry $1 million per year. All other expenses, the bill provided, must be paid by the city. But in the city, Moses had no political leverage. The Board of Estimate kept delaying approval of the route. The allocations for right-of-way kept getting involved in endless snarls, and at the end of 1933, Moses could look back and see that it had taken him as long to build a total of 2 miles of the Parkway projects in Queens as it had taken him to build 22 miles of the Southern State Parkway. Roosevelt's successor as governor, Herbert H. Lehman, spelled like the Lehman Brothers, deeply respected Moses. Says one man who served as an advisor to both, Roosevelt saw Jones Beach in terms both of people swimming and in terms of the political gains that could come from these people swimming. Herbert Lehman thought only of helping people to go swimming and be happy. And he felt that no one could do that job better than Robert Moses. Within a month after Lehman took office in January 1933, he handed to Moses even more power than Roosevelt had given him. In 1932, Congress, at President Hoover's request, had created the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to help self-supporting public works projects. Lehman set up a state emergency public works commission to screen such projects and determine which should be submitted to Washington, and named Moses its chairman. This post gave Moses the power to get work underway on his huge bridge and parkway plan for the Niagara Frontier. A Niagara Frontier Bridge Authority was established, received $2,800,000 in federal funds, and constructed bridges that linked both the north and south ends of the Great Island near Buffalo to the mainland. A Thousand Islands Bridge Authority built the International Bridge to Canada. Under his direction, a New York State Bridge Authority was established to purchase, through agreements to be negotiated, the Bear Mountain Bridge from the Harrimans to its other private owners. A Saratoga Springs Authority began refurbishing and expanding the spa. I don't know what spa we're talking about. Negotiating in Washington with the RFC, which is the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, Moses obtained funds for the Port of New York Authority to construct the Lincoln Tunnel, and for the city to construct Hillside, Knickerbocker, and other housing developments. As he persuaded Mayor O'Brien, okay, that's a new mayor. I thought the mayor was Herbert Lehman, I guess, for moving. As he persuaded Mayor O'Brien to ask the legislature to establish a tri-borough bridge authority. Oh wait, sorry, the governor was Lehman, right? Yes. Okay, so now we're talking about Mayor O'Brien. And Pearl's here. As he persuaded Mayor O'Brien to ask the legislature to establish a tri-borough bridge authority that could issue its own bonds secured by toll revenues and that would therefore be eligible for aid from the newly formed Federal Public Works Administration. And the Public Works Administration granted a $44,200,000 combination loan and grant to the authority on condition that the city make certain additional token contributions. But hardly had the Tammany-controlled authority gotten its hands on the first installment of the grant than it blew it on inflated condemnation awards and council fees. In addition, the city proved unable to make even the first installment of its token payment. The Public Works Administration thereupon cut off funds and announced that no more would be forthcoming until the city paid up, and the authority cleaned up. And in 1933, there were no immediate prospects of either development. We're really speeding ahead in time right now. In vain, Moses pointed out to the Board of Estimate that the money the TERA and PWA, what's the TERA? I'm so sorry. I really feel like I should have that. TERA. I'm so anti-acronym. Okay, I'm just gonna hope that that we have more context clues. In vain, Moses pointed out to the Board of Estimate that the money the TERA and PWA were prepared to spend in New York would create vast improvements in the city, at virtually no cost to the taxpayers. In vain, he pointed out that the money would put thousands of hungry men to work for salaries that would feed their families. Such considerations were not of interest to the Tammany-dominated board. And those that were of interest, Moses, outside the city's power structure as he was, could not offer them. Okay, we're almost done with the chapter. These past few pages have kind of been an information-dense slog. All through 1933, the city's financial situation worsened. In May, City Comptroller Charles W. Berry informed Mayor O'Brien that the city would be unable to pay $100 million in short-term revenue notes coming due in June. The bankers agreed to extend the notes only after the city agreed to an almost doubled interest rate and budget cuts so stringent that they made it all but impossible for the city to keep its physical plant in repair. And despite the extension, in September, Berry, the comptroller, told O'Brien that the city would be unable to meet its October 24th payroll. After 9 days of frantic meetings in which a worried Governor Lehman participated, the bankers agreed on September 27 to further extensions after the city agreed to accept an even more stringent repayment provision and to balance its 1934 budget. The city's worries were still not over. It required legislative authorization to meet the bankers' demands, but the legislature's Republican majority saw the city's plight as a lever they could use to pry various concessions from Lehman, and a long, tense bargaining session ensued. Not until October 18, just 6 days before the city would, by all common business definitions, enter a state of bankruptcy, was the authorization given. And a look ahead was hardly reassuring. The amount of short-term revenue notes coming due in the next 2 years was $500 million. Nevertheless, in the summer of 1933, Moses was convinced that events were moving for rather than against him. For during that summer, over a period of several weeks, he was convinced that he was going to get a chance personally to move the city as its next mayor. Dun dun dun. End of chapter. I'm not going to read the next chapter. I'm just going to call it for today. But the next chapter is chapter 19, To Power in the City. And the first sentence is, in New York City, 1933 was the year of the Goo-Goo. If you check the table of contents, there are pages with maps. Okay. I guess the table of contents is probably in the front. Oh yeah, I see. Okay, so it'd be page probably page 302 is going to be the relevant maps, I'm guessing. Not really, actually. You know what? I'll just look at maps another time. Yeah, I'm so excited for the Goo-Goos. All right, well, that was page 346, and I'm going to call it and start other stuff because I didn't really get anything done today because I was driving. Okay, goodbye. Have a good rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll be better at being at 2 p.m.-ish. Maybe. We'll see. So far, I've been really bad at doing things on time. I hope it's clear, but I'm not really doing this for an audience as much as for myself. And that's why the sound quality is bad and why I don't, pre-record and edit out my, all the times I misspeak or anything. Most of this is just me, trying to hold myself accountable for finishing. So, but yeah, see you later.